going to get into some of the questions, but I do want to address what you just brought up. And this is the 51st state stuff. This is where it's getting into this. The tariffs, where a lot of people are confused is that there are 2 rounds of tariffs. Donald Trump has not been confusing or confused about this. The media is trying to make it sound like he's very confused. He's an old man. He can't keep track of what he's talking about or any of this stuff. It doesn't appear to be the case. It appears to be very straightforward that there is a punitive set of tariffs that he brought on first, and that's the 25% tariffs that are, targeting Canada, Mexico, only those 2 countries for border issues, security related, and that seems to be very cut and dry. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the numbers of this or that. Well, the idea is show the administration that you have been moving in that direction. I think the big issue where he says that there's a deficit between the countries, it's about how much military spending they haven't done and the obligations to border security, not just the southern border, but the northern border, the border all around their part of the Canadian part of the continent. So Donald Trump put those tariffs in, and then later came in with another set of tariffs that's supposed to happen on April 2nd, not April 1st. So people don't think it's a joke. It's on April 2nd, which is going to be reciprocal tariffs for any country that has tariffs on America, or VAT taxes or other trade barriers. It's going to be a reciprocal thing for the purpose of encouraging nations to lower their trade barriers or else face trade barriers themselves. Am I misrepresenting that, or does that sound right to you?
Not at all. I mean, if people actually read the executive orders that he signed within the first days of his administration, you'd understand exactly what his problem is with Canada and Mexico and what the first set of tariffs seek to address until we deal with those problems. The 2 things are completely unrelated. It's not one set of tariffs, like you just said. It is 2.
Yeah, it's 2. And one you can see as more of an economic sanction from the executive branch of the government, because he doesn't have to pass that through Congress. He just straight up, we're putting an economic sanction on you because for behavior, a behavioral thing. The other one is actually trade related, the second set. And it's, again, if it's reciprocal, then I don't think any of the Canadian politicians should have anything to complain about, because that is in fact their response to the first set of tariffs, right?
We are one of the most protectionist economies in the developed world, period. We charge everybody tariffs to do business here. Now you can think that that's okay. You can say, look, we need to defend our agricultural industry. We need to defend our different sectors because the Americans have this wonderful thing called a warm climate. They can produce multiple crops in a year. It gives them a big advantage over Saskatchewan, where it's frozen 6 months of the year. So some of these tariffs seek to address that so that our already depleted agricultural sector doesn't get more depleted. Like we used to have food security in this country. We don't have that anymore. We rely on imports most of the time. We don't do a lot of canning. There's a lot of processing. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but a lot of those tariffs seek to protect us from being too depleted. That's fine. But you also have to recognize, likewise, that we charge those things and we exclude American businesses. And so when Donald Trump is talking about a $200 billion subsidy, what he's talking about is the amount of money and business that's lost voluntarily so that we can protect ourselves in our trade agreements. And he's saying, look, if you're not going to pay for defense, if you're not going to defend yourselves, if you're going to take us for granted that no matter what happens, and we do. I mean, I grew up with this as a cultural idea that if the Russians invaded or the Chinese invaded, the big American army is going to protect us. We live under their nuclear umbrella. But at the same time, we just spent years insulting Donald Trump, insulting the Republican Party by our public office holders. So we are actually the abusive partner in the relationship. We are toxic towards the Americans, and we don't appreciate what they do for us. And so this administration has called us on that. Now, I think there's a way that you can address their legitimate concerns, because Sam Cooper, myself, many others, we've highlighted how we're exporting to the United States. That in spite of the fact that very few people cross over the border illegally, 500% more people on the terrorist watch list go into the United States from Canada than go in from Mexico. I've talked about and put paid to the fact that We launder money, not just for Chinese triads and cartels, but for Hezbollah and Hamas. This is recognized by CSIS, publicly available government documents. It's not some crazy long-haired dude telling you conspiracy theories. I put paid to it. I give you the receipts. I show you the reference material. Everybody in the world knows what Canada is. We're a money laundering narco state. North. We're like Mexico North. The only people who don't know it are Canadians. And when you try and educate people, they say, no, it's not real. It's not happening. They present the only graphic I ever see is the 1% of seizures coming across the border, as if that means anything. It doesn't mean anything. We don't police our ports. We're barely policing our border. We don't police any rail traffic. We don't search any rail traffic leaving the country or coming in. That's just the state of things. So they've called us out for that. And we either address it or we suffer, or we can just pretend that changing our ketchup brands and all of a sudden draping ourselves in the flag is going to solve our problems. It's not.
I've been on the wrong end of that one a ton. I just, even just for having an American flag behind me, because I'm a dual citizen of, Canada and the United States. And I stand with both countries. Yeah, right. I get it all the time.
Traitor. Most of your members of parliament, by the way, and probably Doug Ford, it's my understanding that Ford is a dual citizen as well. So you're not alone.
No, I'm not alone. And I find that, take what the politicians are saying with a grain of salt. And it really has been a cynical game of them doing this, draping in the flag to bolster and posture to use people's emotional opinions on what they think of this, false nostalgia of what Canada used to be, and think that it'll ever get back to that at all.
Well, they've been telling us we're a post-national state. We're the cultural mosaic. Canada doesn't have any core national identity. The one movement that we had was the trucker convoy that was actually draped in the Canadian flag. They seized people's bank accounts. They suspended the charter. They stomped all over everybody. They were found in court to have been wrong in doing so, but nobody was ever held accountable. And the Canadian flag was buried under a heap of snow on the streets of Ottawa. Now, all of a sudden, they flipped. There was articles I showed in my channel of how the Canadian flag was dangerous. They actually, in their publications, they listed that people who display the Canadian flag you had reason to be suspicious. Well, now all of a sudden, we're supposed to believe that nationalism is a thing again, that Canada has a core identity, though they can't define it. And this part-time Canadian, Mark Carney, who lives in New York, identifies as a European, is supposed to be the great savior, the great patriotic champion. A friend of mine, just before I got live, sent me a picture of some chocolate bars that are being manufactured with labels, and it's all Canadian flags because now it's becoming marketing. I showed on today's show how CTV was pushing an artist that is creating elbows up memorabilia and T-shirts and everything, and giving them free advertising. And I'm thinking to myself, elbows up. So that's a hockey analogy for keeping your elbows up so you can give somebody a concussion when you hit them into the corner. And it's like, I thought we were nonviolent, but now we're not. It's just amazing how the story changed so fast, and so many people just went with it. And most of them have no idea what's actually driving events right now, what's behind the tariffs, and what Donald Trump's motives are.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've never been a sports ball guy, or a sports puck, whatever you want to call it. So I didn't know what elbows up even meant until I looked it up, and that's exactly it. How to fight dirty is what that is.
Essentially, that's it.
Yeah, fighting dirty, and fighting dirty they're doing because they're getting people all wrapped up in the flag, and so this is what hurts the most. Long term, this is going to do us a disservice. It's gonna hurt Canada. For a few politicians that might get some political gains in the immediate, right? Long term, and this plays into the whole 51st state thing. The way I see it here is Americans, for the large part, they just look at Canada like, look at those guys, like them. They're our neighbors. They're quaint. Yep. They say A. They eat maple or whatever that those Canadians do up there, but we like them and they're nice and they say sorry. So Donald Trump, don't hurt him too bad. Like, yeah, just get him in a smart knot, but don't hurt him too bad. And then all of this stuff happens, and they're booing the national anthem with, veterans singing. And Americans, they hold the national anthem a lot more dear to them, and it means a lot more because of the lyrics of the song. There's so much around that. Go ahead.
We look hysterical. Like they don't. Most of the Americans that I know down there are just like, what has gone wrong up there? Like, why are you people losing your minds? And at the same time, China's doing very similar things to us, but we're not talking about them. They're lopping off, they're killing Canadians, even though they're drug dealers. We're not taking their product off the shelves. And this whole approach, the Americans are right there. They're right beside us. And they're just waiting with bags of money to buy our goods. And that's all they've ever been doing. Plus, we live under their nuclear umbrella. They're really, I don't want to call them friends, because in geopolitics, there's no friends, there's relations. They are the best relation we have. This idea that we can replace them by better integrating into Europe is a pipe dream. There's an ocean between us that makes it economically completely unfeasible to do what our politicians are trying to say that we can do. And the Americans didn't do anything wrong. Like, they literally haven't done anything wrong. That we charge them tariffs. Why can't they charge us tariffs? Everybody, we charge everybody. Other people charge us. What's the big deal? The government loves taxes. So the response is completely disproportionate. And I think our politicians, they just need something, because it keeps hidden in plain sight all the very real problems. Like, I can't believe the people who deny that there's a drug problem in this country, but then walk around the streets in small towns and you can see people living in tents and meth zombies and like, the drug crisis is everywhere, but people don't think it's a big problem, that it's a systemic problem, but it is. You needed a crisis. And I think, and Donald Trump's an easy character to hate with that hair, the way he talks, the spray tan. I mean, it's easy, right? It's effective propaganda.
My big fear, though, is that at some point the Americans won't think that we're nice people anymore. And then when Donald Trump is going hard at us, they'll say, "Go get him, Donald." That's what Canada doesn't need.
Imagine what happens if Doug Ford actually were to cut off electricity to 1.5 million people over tariffs. Like, is there in any world, is threatening a war crime or a crime against humanity proportional to a tariff? It makes no sense whatsoever. It's deliberately aggravating. And we're kind of lucky that he's showing restraint. That's the other thing. How many pauses are we in now? And instead of being grateful that we have time to negotiate, the politicians take victory laps and say he's going soft and he's losing. And he's how much of this is he supposed to take? That's what I wonder.
Well,
they're proud people. They're proud people, and we're spitting in their face constantly. We're like, you remember the dog cartoon, Spike and Ike? You had the big bulldog, and then you got the little dog, and the big dog protected the little dog from. Well, what happens if Ike decided to turn on Spike? What would actually happen? And that's kind of the relationship. We're turning on Spike.